Welcome back to In Pursuit of Magic, where we explore the things that inspire us, connect us, and the magic we find along the way. I'm Matthew Medina, and today's incredibly talented guest is an award-winning composer, lyricist, musical director, and so much more. He was recently featured on Playbill for their songwriter series. I'm very excited to welcome Jesse J. Sanchez. Jesse, thank you so much for being here today. I was just looking at all the things you've been part of and like spearheaded and the things you're actively doing and have in the works, and it's packed. You got a lot
Ye
going on.
yeah, it's, thank you. Thank you for the intro. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and it's good stuff. It's all
Yeah.
good, and I'm excited for what's to come and the other things that are kind of cooking on, right now.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about that in terms of the things that you're able to talk about at the moment.
Of
But I'm
course.
also curious about how you got started. I know a lot of people at an early age, there's certain things that inspire them or interest them, and they feel a certain pull in that direction. So I'm wondering, when it comes to writing music and directing, were there any particular shows, movies, musicians that really inspired you? Was it something more organic that you were like, I feel this inside me?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always credit my grandpa, my abuelo. He's a bass player, and he lives out in Los Angeles, in Azusa, California, and so he was really the person that I looked up to. We would go my mom, she was a single parent, she would take me and my sibling down to Los Angeles every summer, and we would hang out, and him and his siblings, they would be rehearsing. They had a band called A Todo Madre, ATM. And they also did a lot of church music, believe it or not, with that word, that phrase. And so, I would always sit there and I'd be like, wow, these people are so good. What is going? I want to do that one day. I want to be able to play in his band. And so that kind of started it. And of course, like, I was always around a lot of different music. I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up in San Jose. But I also spent a lot of time with my grandma, in San Jose, and she just was, like, such a music nerd. Like, I remember she had everything from, like, Chicago to Linda Ronstadt to, Los Tigres. Like, she just had records for days of different kinds of music, and it would always be playing. So she was really, like, the person who, as well, kind of just was like, "You can listen to anything." She took me to my first musical, I would say. She took me to watch a production of Evita, touring production, when I was really young, but she was always into that too. So between those 2, people, I was like, "Okay, I really like music," and so I really wanted to kind of figure out how could I be a part of that, and my mom was super supportive, of course, like, "Yes, please do it. Please do whatever you wanna do, as long as you're not, running the streets and getting into trouble," and that kinda thing. So she was very supportive as well.
That always seems like the best kind of thing to have or you could wish for when you're pursuing something, just to have that support system and then to be surrounded by people who are doing similar things. Because it's not only an inspiration, but it's also a source of support and maybe advice and guidance and knowledge, which is always very helpful. And I'm wondering, within that, as you got more into it and more interested, was there any particular moment where you experienced something that made you say, this is it. Like, this is where I belong.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I feel very lucky because I hear a lot of peers, a lot of, folks, especially gente, especially a lot of Latine folks where their families, their parents, don't support them in the arts, don't, encourage them, or they do support them and then they're like, "Okay, so you're gonna be a doctor, you're gonna be a lawyer," that traditional, like, stereotype. But my mom was not, she was never that way. She was always like, "Whatever you wanna do." Even though we had no money, we were, like, super poor. Like, I remember waiting in line with my mom, for food stamps. And we get up on a Sunday morning and go down to the Mexican grocery store and wait in line for our food stamps. Like, so I knew that there early on, like, okay, I'm not gonna take this for granted if she's gonna drive me across the city to go to a different school and kind of, use somebody else's address so I could do music in a public education system for free. But so yeah, to answer your question, yeah, there was really, like, when I went into high school, I early on, I went to a performing arts magnet. And like I said, my mom used a different address so that way we could go. We used to live in East San Jose, which was like, super low income. And then she would drive us like 45 minutes to drop us off at like 6 in the morning at the middle school, me and my sister, when school didn't start until like 8 because she had to then go to her job. So we would sit in the cold for 2 hours. We got very used to it. Eventually, like cafeterias and things started opening earlier, so we could kind of go in and be warm. Libraries, but so after middle school, I went across the street to the high school, and by that time, I started playing the trumpet. Because I was like, oh, that trumpet could be, I could play trumpet in my grandpa's band. I had that in my mind, not knowing what the trumpet would lead to later on. And so I did that, and because him and all of his siblings always sung, I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna join the choir too because I wanna be able to sing." Like, they all sing together, and it's like these weird it's not the same thing, but they're singing all these different which was harmony. And so I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna do that." So I got really good in middle school, and when I went to high school, and I didn't have, like, lessons or anything, it was just, like, practicing, and I was like that kid, like, sitting at home and my mom being like, "You're so loud." Uh, but in high school, is really where it clicked for theater for me, because I loved the trumpet, because I loved to sing, because I loved all these different things that I was just like, "Oh, it's so cool." The high school I went to is a really well-known high school in the Bay Area for their theater program, and I didn't know. I just went because they had a really good, band program because it was part of the thing you did from element. It actually started in elementary. I joined in middle school, but it was part of the just like the pathway, to do the performing arts magnet. And so when I went to high school, I realized, that there was like this really thriving theater program. I was like, "Okay, that's cool." And so one day I was sitting in jazz band, and this is my freshman year, and I'll never forget the choir teacher, Anne Marie Katamopoulos, rest in peace, love her. She came into jazz band one day. She also was the choir teacher and the music director for all of the musicals. She came into my to the jazz band class. And at the end of rehearsal, she goes, "Jesse, you're Jesse, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Come here." And she hands me a book and she says, "You're gonna be in the pit orchestra for our upcoming musical." And, and she walked away. That was it. And I was like, okay. I was like, all right. Sounds good. And so I didn't know what it was. I had no idea what it was. And as like a freshman who was already kind of getting good at the trumpet, I was kind of a little cocky and was like, I'll be fine. I won't even take a look at it. And so I went to the first rehearsal. And I remember the first thing I did was the first thing I did was I opened the book and we were about to start the overture uh, for Oklahoma. We start playing it and I just fumbled it. I just could not play any of it. My teacher, she stopped everybody and she goes, "Jesse, I thought you were good." I was like, "Oh." I was like, "Interesting." I was like, "Well, yeah, I could play this." And she comes and looks. She's like, "None of your key changes, none of your key signatures are marked. None of this is marked." And it's because musical theater, you're playing all 12 keys in just the overture alone, right? That's just kind of how it is. You play every key. There's a key change here and there for the next duet, all the different. So you played a lot of different things. And in my mind, I thought, oh, it'll be just like I don't know, Shenandoah, which was a band piece. And so she really kicked me into gear and it was really challenging. I said, okay, all right. So I went away and I came back and I could play the overture and I kept practicing and so that was the thing that I was really hooked me. And then we had our first sits probe and I had no idea what it was. No idea what it was. And I sat there and they came in because I didn't realize that, "Oh, I'm getting this ready so that way we could be the band for like a stage play." Right? I didn't realize that. I just thought it was another ensemble. That was like jazz band, concert band, marching band, whatever it was. And so then that happened. And then I realized that there was a bunch of singing, harmony, there was jazz elements, there was, orchestral elements, there were string players across from me, there were, a cappella moments in the ensemble, there were, all this. And I was like, oh, interesting. So this is the place where all of the elements kind of come together. And that right there is the thing where I was like, okay, I have to do this to the point where I quit sports. I was huge into sports. I did play football all through high school, but I did quit baseball because my coach was like, "You have to choose," and I was like, "Yeah, well, yeah, hello, I choose theater." So, and that was kind of like the thing that then propelled me into um, doing theater. So here we are.
Wow. A couple of things I find incredible about that is not only did you have a teacher who believed in you, but also challenged you. And then even with that first day, still believed in you to know what you were capable of. It was like, come on, I know you can do this. And it just seems like that maybe pushed you even more because you were so used to the standard of what you were doing that this kind of took you onto this other level. I feel like almost trained you for what was coming next for you because so much came after that.
I agree, and I think I'm not the only one. There are a lot of people on Broadway, a lot of actors that actually went to my school program. A lot of big names, and a lot of these phrases that she really instilled in us were like, being on time is late, that kind of stuff. Just like the little things that she like literally drilled. Back then, like this was like the early 2000s. Like I mean, there was like moments where I was like, okay, maybe that's a little unnecessary. Fine, but at the same time, I never wanted to disappoint her, and I wanted to do my best. And it's like unique to see like one person who, because it wasn't just me, it was like hundreds of kids that she would then be like, this person needs a little bit softer. This person, so she was just such a unique lady and such a amazing human. Who really had an impact. And I mean, she passed away a couple years ago, but until then, like I kept in touch with her. And, when I worked on Hamilton, she was like one of the first people to text me and be like, "I'm so proud of you. Oh my god, this is so cool." Like came to my shows whenever I music directed in the Bay. Yeah, she was just like a huge supporter and always asking like, "So what are you doing next? What's next?" So she was kind of just like, yeah. I think she saw the potential early on, and was able to kind of just like say the right thing and do the right thing to push me to do a lot of it.
Yeah, and I think what's part of the beauty of that is her asking what's next seems like kind of a perfect example of a lot of people who are in creative fields, whether it's music or acting, whatever it may be, where maybe they have a certain dream in mind and then they get there and it happens. And then it's like, okay, well, now what? Like, what next? Because sometimes we can't dream beyond that first dream. And then when we achieve it, I think there's this whole other world out there. There's so much more that maybe we didn't know we were capable of, but someone else knows. They see it. So I could see how helpful that would be. And so I'm wondering from that experience, then moving on towards even bigger things and a mix between playing music, writing music, even directing. How did that transition happen for you?
Yeah, so then after that, I feel like in my up until now, like it still happens. There's moments in my life where I kind of get like I settle a little and I start like being like, oh yeah, I could do this and I'm gonna be a hot shot at this and whatever. And then there's a thing that happens where I'm like, oh, the back to the like, what is next? So I actually need to keep going, right? And so it was right after high school. Even though it was like really successful and really amazing, I got really good, even better at the trumpet to the point where I started, I think my first paid gig was when I was like 15, where I was like a sophomore in high school or something. And I started seeing the money and I was like, oh, this is interesting. Okay, I can make money off this thing. I never knew. I didn't know I was going to be that good. And my first gig, of course, was in an orchestra. Shout out to Sunnyvale Community Players, a community theater, and they played the orchestra. Yeah, they hired me to play in their pit, and I got really good and I started playing a lot of salsa gigs. I started playing a lot of different things. Before I knew it, I was graduating high school and then this is where my mom came into play and she said, "So what are you going to do?" And I was like, I think I'm just going to go to like a junior college or a community college right here around right, stay close. I know we can't afford to go anywhere. I'm not even going to try to apply. So I didn't apply anywhere out of high school, even though I had like, I was ASB president. It was in all of the ensembles. I didn't take very many AP classes because I was like, why do I need to take AP classes? That's dumb. I took, I did a lot of stuff. My GPA was decent. I think it was like a 3.2 or something. That was like not doing homework ever. It was crazy. And so, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to make money. I'm going to be a famous trumpet player. And my mom was like, okay, yeah, sure, I guess. And so she said, as long as you're going to school, and I went to a community college that is only supposed to you're only supposed to be there for 2 years, and I was there for 4 years. And it was a time in my life where I gigged a lot. I went to San Francisco a lot, which San Francisco from San Jose is like a 45-minute drive, an hour drive. And so I would drive back and forth. I would play in the clubs. I would do a lot of gigs everywhere. And so I wouldn't make my classes the next day. So I signed up for all these classes and I did a lot of, but I didn't go to my classes that actually, well, not that actually matter, but things that like science and math and, the things, but I would make it to my 1:30 jazz band class or my
Great.
3 p.m. choir class or like be in the orchestra for the school orchestra at night. I would make it to those things, but would sign up and every semester I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to take Psych 101 and I'm going to go. And after the first class, I would get there and be like, I hate this. So 4 years, just to kind of like a revolving door of just like me signing up, never dropping classes. That was like a huge mistake. Never dropping classes. So I had all these incompletes. I had all these really bad GPA, this really bad GPA. And then my going into my fourth year, like I guess the last semester, my mom like sat me down. She was like, "So what are you gonna do?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I had a job at Starbucks. I thought I had it. I thought it was gonna be great. And she's like, "I don't know if you want to play like $80 gigs for the rest of your life." She was like, "Because you spend like 4 hours at these gigs, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? I think there's nothing wrong with that, but I get it. I understand. She wanted more for me. And so she said, "But what about school? Like, you're not going to school. Like, you are going to school, but you're not. What are you gonna do? What's gonna be your life?" And she asked me that and left it at that. She wasn't angry. She wasn't mad. And later that night, I just like couldn't sleep, and I started thinking about, like, oh shit, what am I gonna do? Like, what am I actually gonna do? And by now I was like 21, 22. And I was like, I don't actually know what I'm gonna do with my life. Like, okay, I need to go to school. I need to go to college. I need to get out of here. I need to get away from the gigs. I just need to go somewhere, get my degree, and then after that, I'll figure that part out after. So I started researching like who would take 2.3, 2.1 GPAs, 1.8 GPAs to transfer. And the best thing happened. The jazz band that I was in at the community college, the jazz band teacher, another teacher, there's a theme here in my life. His name is Gus Cambites, who I also stay really in close contact with. He took the jazz band up to the Palouse, which is in Idaho, and it's like the border of Idaho and Washington, the states, where Washington State or Wazoo is and the University of Idaho is. And it's like right there. And they have this really wonderful jazz festival every single year. They bring the who's who out. It's amazing. Big old program at the University of Idaho. It's just like it's like a hidden gem up there. And he got his master's at Washington State. And so he was like, the jazz band's gonna go, we're gonna fundraise, everybody's gonna go, it's gonna be for free, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, great. I went out there, we played, I did super well, and I met the trumpet teacher at the University of Idaho. He then had a conversation with me and was like, we're looking for, lead players, trumpet players. Are you going to some big school? What are you doing with your life? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, I'm looking to transfer, but I don't have a good GPA. So then that started the conversation. Before I knew it, I came home. I was like, Mom, I'm going to the University of Idaho. She's like, Mijo, Idaho? What? That's not what we talked about. We talked about you going to school, but not. And I said, yeah. And so 4 months later, in August, I moved and went up to the University of Idaho and started, kind of had a fresh start. Didn't know anybody, walked in the first day and really honed in on playing, and that's where the writing kind of started. I was really interested in jazz choir the whole time, so I was in a lot of the jazz choirs, and I really honed in on my vocal writing and my vocal technique and like part writing. Every like Friday, we were able to bring into this like top jazz choir, it was a very select group, an arrangement, and then the choir teacher would then give us feedback. He was also like the theory teacher, so he would give me a lot of like one-on-one time and like, maybe this voice leading doesn't work or this tenor line is theoretically is good, but is it singable? The alto line, is it, how does that actually play when it's in unison with the bass line? Like, is that good? And then the solo line, like, is the solo line telling a story? And that right there was like, oh, I know that. Like, that's theater. And so that's where really the writing started for me. So that was the thing. That was the next
Uh,
thing. It's crazy.
Wow, part of what I find so incredible about your story up until that point is that it kept taking you to places you didn't expect, like, all along your journey, which is amazing, and it always took just some nudging from someone,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
yet you had the tools to get there the whole time. You just needed a little nudge and like, "Oh, okay, well, maybe I can think about this." And it's just amazing because it seems like you're proving to yourself what you're capable of and all the things you
Yeah,
can do.
100%, 100%. I think, like, I always whenever I do something like this and I reflect, it's always a nice reminder, like, you can do it if you just really say, "You know what? Yes, I need to do this thing," right? And of course, it's always that's why I always say, like, keep your cheerleaders close, right? Because 'Cause they're the ones who really you never know that one day it might finally be like, "Hey, Jesse, what are you gonna do next?" And you're like, "Oh," and then it sparks something, right? Because we get so, like, in our way with all the things that we do, especially when you get to a certain place in theater where you're just like, "Okay, what's the next rehearsal? When's the next tech? What are my next deadlines for, whatever it might be, a new script?" And so we get in our way, and so there's a lot I always lean on the people who are my close, friends and family who I trust and that kind of thing, because you never know.
Absolutely, and I think between support and community, which there's a lot of in these fields too, it's super important, all the time, to form those connections, and
Absolutely.
that actually also has me curious about, because you have different creative passions and kind of outlets that you get to play on in everything that you're doing between the writing, the directing, the playing, so much more. How do you think that that helps channel all your energy and creative passions, and how do they both help each other in terms of the process and maybe sometimes challenge you because they all
Sure,
have to kind of mesh?
sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I look at the phrase theater maker, right? I think about that phrase and I keep that like really near and dear to heart. That is like what we all are. Whether you're a stage manager, um, actor, stagehand, whatever you're doing, you're still making theater, right? You're still doing the thing. And so I think about that and they all go hand in hand just like a production. So for myself, I have always had in my mind since early on, the more things you can do and be really good at, not just kind of mediocre, but be really good at, the better you are going to be off to be somebody who has a voice in that particular field. And so it's just like, a CEO, like the best CEOs out there are the ones who actually understand like what it means to work in the mailroom, what it means to, be a marketing and those kinds of things because they understand where everybody's kind of coming from. And so for me, I started with, playing in orchestras and playing in pits, and then I quickly realized like, oh, so you have to be good at piano to be a music director. So I started practicing a lot of piano, and got pretty good. I would say, meh, better than okay, pretty good, enough to music direct. And then I started music directing and kind of setting a vision, and then realizing, oh, all of this is just collaboration, and I like to think that I'm a pretty good collaborator and can help do a lot of that stuff. Um, but I always tell, like I tell actors all the time, like, "Hey, it will be so mind blowing the moment you get to sit on the other side of the table. Like, be an assistant director just once. Be a part of the process because there's so much information. And I wish it were easier because then it becomes like, oh, it's gatekeeping and that kind of stuff. But I just wish it was easier for us to like give everybody an opportunity to be on the other side and vice versa, right? Like, I have only acted in a musical once and it was a very small part. I don't even know if it considers acting, but I understood what like costumes mean. And it was me being in like the Salvation Army band, right? Like, kind of figuring what that means and being part of the choreo and that stuff. But I'm not an actor first. But still, I thought it was really helpful. Same thing with music directing. Same thing with being a music assistant for Alex Lacamoire and kind of understanding how his approach is. Being I don't know, an arranger for Little Duende that went to the O'Neill and other great places and kind of learning from Robbie and Georgina and kind of understanding what they're so all of this just kind of goes hand in hand. It just the more information you can do, it actually as a writer now, as a writer and a composer, it really informs a lot of my decisions when I'm writing stories for the stage.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think, like you said, someone who knows kind of all the elements that come together and how they work kind of make the best people in charge of putting it together and collaborating because you understand the needs of each section of the moving pieces, all that stuff.
Yep,
And, with all
totally.
those successes and the things that work out and work well, there's also always going to be missed opportunities, closed doors, things that don't pan out. And so I'm wondering how you manage to overcome those moments and don't let it stop you from forging ahead.
Yeah, I think that for me personally, I know we're all different, but the moment that I'm told no, it gives me more fuel for the fire. And so it really it because I've been told no since, the part of my story that I've told is all the successes, but there was a lot of parts of it where, I've been in rooms where it's been racist. It's been, people telling me, like, even as an early young kid in high school, I was in all state honor band. And one of the first rehearsals that I stepped into, I was carrying my trumpet case. And these two kids were like, "Oh, are you lost? Like yeah, this is the band. You should, I don't know, we can find you somewhere else." And I was like, "Am I lost? Am I lost because I don't look like you and because you're not used to seeing somebody with, like, big old hair, Mexican hair, and, like, who has baggy jeans and, kind of different things." So I was like, okay. And that right there fueled my fire. And I happened to be their first chair. So I sat and then I was like, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're cutting off on three." Right. So things like that really have my whole career have really lit a fire under my ass.
Yeah.
Things like that. I mean, even to the professional world, right? And um, uh, people don't look like me, unfortunately, often, that are in positions of power or positions like director and that kind of thing. It's still a very white world in theater, and so I pride myself on that because I can open doors because I can say, like, just because I don't wear suits and polo shirts and that kind of thing, like, I could do some great work. And so that stuff really kind of energizes me, for better or worse. Because I wish it didn't have to be that way. I wish it could just be we've all come in and just assume, like, this person's like the badass and the top of his game, And so there's that. Sorry, I kind of lost the question because I went down a fiery topic.
Oh, yeah, no, I think you answered perfectly. I mean, and then the fact that you're kicking down doors and then holding it open for others. And I think that's what it's going to initiate real change. And we're gonna look at theater differently. We're gonna see faces differently and more faces and more stories and more voices. And I think that's really important. And so I'm wondering what advice would you give to others who either feel stuck or feel overwhelmed by the size of their dream, or whatever obstacles are in their way? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would just say, like, theater is based on stories, right? And we all have stories. So that's the bare minimum. And everybody belongs. And if somebody says no, use that so that to get to the next thing, because at that point in time, I also like to give the benefit of the doubt to people, right? Especially like in casting. If somebody, says no that moment, that's one person. I know we've heard this a million times, but it's literally one person saying no to you. And there's so many factors that go into it, right? Like, if you're casting, like, for a regional theater and you're sitting behind the table and somebody comes in, we all behind the table hope that this is the person, right? We're all like, please let this be the person. We have no preconceived ideas of, like, well, there's this person. Yeah, we hope that this is the person. It makes our job so much easier. Right. And then if it is the person, there are then 500 little things that go into the conversations post that. So that's just kind of what I want to tell, like, my actor friends, even like my music director friends, or people who have to interview with. We all interview with people, right, to get a job, and so there's just other factors, and I think, like, I have to tell myself all this time, all of these times, like, just because you say no, there's a yes that's coming up from that no, right? That's just what it is. And so take those no's, reflect. I love to reflect on, like, okay, so that conversation didn't go very well. You know what? Next time I think I'm gonna do this. And ask and reach out to people. I get so many actors and so many different people who reach out to me via email or Instagram. "Hey, can you give me some feedback?" Sometimes I'm not successful, right? It's really hard sometimes to just give feedback or, like, have a coffee with somebody, just because of the time of it all, but, more times than not, people will respond and just be like, "Yeah, it actually wasn't you. It was there we need somebody who's local and that, has housing." Right? And there's like it might not even be you. So, yeah, just keep going and, just always ask yourself, "What's next?" Because I think that that'll be like your internal thing. And then for writer friends, like set a deadline for yourself, whether it's like you got into reading or not, but be like, hey, I'm gonna do a table read over Zoom with my friends in 2 months. That for my writer friends, like that kicks your butt into gear and you're like, oh no, I need to write. And then you really
Yeah.
are forced to write something, set yourself deadlines. But yeah, that's kind of that's kind of a little bit of what I wanted to say.
I think that's a great takeaway. I think asking yourself what's next and also kind of setting kind of guidelines for yourself to hold yourself accountable is always very important. And I know because you have so many elements of the process of creating shows and music that you're part of, I'm wondering, where do you find the magic most? Is it in the process of figuring things out and actually creating stuff? Is it in the rehearsal and seeing it or hearing it played for the first time? Or maybe it's when the audience finally hears it?
I think it's that's such a great question. The reason why I write and compose theater is because there's just a lack of our stories, right? Latine stories, there's just a lack, and we've been saying this for so long, and I know there are people out there doing their damnedest to write and compose and get things in workshops. There's, incredible colleagues like Jaime Lozano and Robbie Hager and Hasita Cusellas, other people out there that are doing the work. Um, and so for me, I that is what started, right? Is like, how can I see more of our stories that are not just about trauma, right? I get it. That is part of it and that's part of our story, but I want to see some stories about like family drama, right? That's what happens. I want to see the Chicano next to normal, right? I want to see the Argentinian Dear Evan Hansen. Like I want to see some shit like that, right? Like I want to see something that is yes, it is, drama, but also I want to see musicals that are like joyous. What happens if we win? And that's kind of like the question for me with my musical Sueños is like everybody has a dream. What happens if we actually obtain those dreams? Like, I want to see what happens, right? Like, because there we do obtain our dreams, right? There's people every day posting on social media like, I got cast on my first Broadway show. That is obtaining your dream, right? And I want to see those stories because that is what helps the next generation. They don't just have to see trauma. They don't just have to see those kinds of things. They can see like it is possible for me to win. And so, that is kind of like the like, why I started writing musicals, that is why I wanted to just represent, I always credit In the Heights, of course, as being the musical that I was like, "Oh, wow, you can do this." But I actually credit, before that, I credit Zoot Suit, I credit Rent, I credit, other kinds of other things that attempted to do this and have one singular character, um, but there's just not a lot of our stories, there's not a lot of our and I know it's like a broken record because we all are saying this. And so I really hope that, people find our stories worth telling and especially in today with all the things that are happening politically, and we're just demonized once again, and it's really sad, but I believe that lights the fire under me and says, you know what, I'm gonna write the next Romeo and Juliet adaptation, set at the border talking about Mexican American versus being Mexican, and what that classism looks like, and ICE, and what does that look like? I'm gonna keep writing these things. And so the magic for me is really having somebody who, an actor opens their book and they have all these songs in their book for auditions, and then they finally have one of my songs in their book, right? Because they could actually go and sing a Mana inspired pop rock song and it has a little bit of Spanish, but it's still musical theater. They don't have to sing like a Selena song, which I love Selena, but there's other there's that we could add to the canon. And so that is part of the magic. And then being able to just see audiences and hear audiences, especially before show, post show, hearing, a lot of Spanish in the audience talking and, oh, them talking about like, oh, that reminds me of my abuela. And like, oh, I remember my sister, she's crazy. She drinks tequila too. And, things that's the magic, right? Because that's what you want. You want to see yourself. You want to sit there and see yourself or see a portion of you that is represented the way it's supposed to be. And so, like, young Jesse who first walked into Oklahoma rehearsal, uh, I did not see that, right? I did not see any of that. I was connected through music. I wasn't connected by the actual story of Oklahoma. And so I think about that, like all the little kids, all the brown kids out there who could just like hum every Lin-Manuel tune, and that's the cool part. That is the cool part. But they won't be humming the Lerner and Lowe's, right? And I respect them, but I want them to be humming things that are for them as well. And yeah, that's kind of the magic for me is just thinking how we can provide these stories and opportunities. Yeah,
There's something very electric about that, and seeing the audience's reaction, hearing people talk about it, seeing people relate to what you're writing. And that definitely makes me curious about Sueños, your musical, because I know you had a workshop production. And so what was that like to watch that unfold, see it like take place in front of you, and what did you feel? What was the outcome of that for you?
well, I'll tell you, Sueños has been like there's been so many hands that have touched it and so many beautiful voices. I just want to first and foremost shout out every single person who has lent their voice, who has sung a song, who has dramaturged something, who has, given money to it. It's been such a unique journey and so fun. And musicals take forever to finally see them come to fruition, right? Um, Seeing it at Las Positas, we so this started all because of a conversation around a concept EP of Sueños that was released a couple years ago. And the like she's like the dean of the school. She heard it, and she's also a friend. She heard it, and she immediately texted me and said, "Jesse, when the rights are available, I want to produce this at the school. It's a Hispanic serving institution. There's a lot of Latine students there." She was like, "I think we would do this thing justice. Like, I want to produce it one day." And I said, "Well, what if we did an earlier version and it's a workshop production? No reviews. I can finally see it up on its feet. There's maybe a live band. We get a choreographer in here and all the, So then she said, let me think about that. I didn't think anything was going to happen because, in the world of musical theater, conversations happen and then sometimes you never pick them back up, even though you try. And so I got a text a few months later, like 4 or 5 months later, saying, "Okay, we're on for Sueños." And I was like, "Wait, what? Happening?" And it was amazing. I mean, it was really just like the hard work, the fruit, seeing it all come together finally. Even though it was still like it wasn't like a high budget or anything, but it was still the core of the story was there. And then we had 5 performances, right? We used the amazing students there, and some local local musicians, and that kind of thing. Tech designer. We had to see a lot of the bells and whistles. We had a choreographer, a wonderful director. We got to see a lot of this stuff kind of come to fruition, and I was like, whoa! And then we had the audience, right, which was so electric, so amazing. People traveled from all over. I'm telling you, people like brought in bus loads of kids from Southern California, all in Northern California. And people flew in, uh, and it was basically like a sold out run for the 5 shows in like a 500 seat or 600 seat house, right? I mean, it was a lot of people, and people were buzzing. People were like posting. I got a lot of people talking to me after, like, so how can we help you? How can we bring Sueños? A lot of Chicanos, a lot of farm workers or people who have parents who are farm workers or they grew up in working in canneries and that kind of thing. They finally saw themselves, right? And they saw their own families, and that right there, and the jokes that are meant for them laughing, all the spent in there, and then them crying, and like them taking away something, and we have all lost people, and, there's a moment, and I won't spoil it too much, but it's a moment in there where we lose somebody, um, and the question again, well, what's next? And the perseverance of our people and what they can do, and then seeing that their dreams can come true. So it was really beautiful and to see a lot of people come out. Um, and I learned a lot. I was able to work with a band, learned a lot in terms of the story, what kind of works, what doesn't, things that I envisioned. I have a collaborator who's been working on the orchestrations with me for a long time, and some additional music stuff. And I turned to him and I go, Jeff, this is exactly what it is. We have a show. And so that, it's always wonderful to kind of feel that, especially when it's not a commissioned piece, right? Or there's nothing, no money supporting it at that point. Now there kind of is some stuff happening. But at that point, it's just been, hopefully we get a grant. Hopefully we get, support from these organizations, which I should also say, New York Theater Barn has really helped us, and connect us with people like Jim Kierstead and Nicole LaFontaine, and some other folks who produced the Sueños album. But it's been a journey. I started writing in 2018, and to finally see not just like a staged reading, but a fully realized, like, this is kind of what it could be. And the pride that went into it, right? Because I think every single student, every single person that was in that cast or behind the crew knew we were doing something that is game changing, because there's nothing like it. And even the team, right? Everybody brought their A game. Everybody did what they could in the time given, of course. And so now we're just like, I took all that information, have made some tweaks to the script, of course, did some, cut some songs, rewrote some things, and just recently submitted it for the Cleveland Prize. It was a finalist for the Cleveland Prize, which is really cool for the libretto. Um, and yeah, so there's, lots of things to come with that show. I'm excited about the future of it. We have some things I can't talk about that are in the works, that I'm really excited for. But it's just the beginning. As I keep saying to everybody who's been attached to the project, it's just the beginning for Sueños, and I would have never guessed that. I would keep saying that it's just the beginning, because
Yeah.
there's something to look forward to.
And part of what's amazing about that is you've been working on it for so long, and yet, yeah, this is just the beginning, and it's such a incredible beginning. Like, it's such a lively and, like, exciting beginning to start with, because I feel like that just fueled the fire more, and now there's so much to come. So I'm excited to follow along and see what's next for it. I know there's so many other things you're also like i- i- creating and a part of. I wanted to bring up also Zapata and talk about that musical, because I think I heard a little bit about it and it sounded really interesting. So tell me more about that show.
Yeah, so Zapata is a commission through Zach Theater and the BIPOC superhero project led by Jose Casas. He's a brilliant Chicano playwright, who teaches at, I think, UMich. I could be wrong. Sorry, I know Michigan schools are very like rivals. Uh, but he approached a bunch of us BIPOC writers in the country and got a group of us together and said, "Hey, I got all this money and grants and stuff. I want to partner you with commissioning theaters, but the caveat is I want to not only commission you with partner theaters, they also have to agree to do a production of your work." Because many, many theaters will commission, and that's as far as you get, right? Good luck on finding a theater. And so that's really unique. And so I was like, "Oh, this is great." So I was partnered with Zach Theater, down in Austin, Texas. They're amazing musical theater. Well, they do plays too. But they primarily do a lot of musicals. They're NAMPT members, if you know what NAMPT is. But I was partnered with them a couple years ago, and my first meeting, there was hardly any parameters, which was another, blessing of like, all we need it to be is 65, 70 minutes. And maybe it could also have like elementary school kids come. So maybe like a fan. It's like, great. Anything else? Nope. And and so I started writing this musical. I spent quite a long time researching. It's called Zapata, a folklorico superhero musical, and so I really wanted to kind of take a look at and investigate folklorico dancing. There's a lot of mariachi plays and different kinds of things out there, and so I was like, this would be unique. This would be different. And so I interviewed a lot of professors and people who studied Amalia Hernandez, who is the person who's kind of coined with like uh, developing the folklorico form in Mexico City. And so, I spent a lot of time with people who learned from her and learned a lot of that stuff. And then I quickly realized that a lot of these dances were stolen from indigenous folks. And so I really was like, oh wow, interesting. So there's a lot of topics in the musical, but it basically just follows a 16-year-old girl named Xochitl, and wants to she discovers that she comes from like a long line of superheroes, and her mom is abducted by Elavo, which is the her brother. Turns out later on it's her brother, who gives kind of like Scar vibes. Uh, and in order for Xochitl to save him, or save her, she has to go to Masatepa, make a magical place that I created in my mind, to then unlock the power of Zapata, which is a nod to Zapata himself, Emiliano Zapata. Um, though that person's not in there. And then she'll become the superhero Zapata and then go save, she can then fight and do all the different things. And so it's really fun. Really, there's a lot of there's a gatito army, there's a lot of puppets, there's a lot of heavy topics that are embedded that aren't on your nose. That really talks about ice, and kind of just like the society we're living in. But at the end of the day, it's a superhero story, and just a girl trying to save her mom. That one of the unique things about the story is that along the way, Xochitl is we see a lot of stories where the parents are always being like, don't forget your culture, don't forget where you're coming from. And this time it's the other way around. She's the one who's like, "Mom, I want to be closer to my Latinidad. I want to be more Mexican." And the mom is like, "No, you need to play the American game." And then you figure out why later on. So it's a little spin on that. But yeah, she goes down this journey down to Masatepa and faces all these things. There's a talking Chihuahua, of course, named Chicalinga. um, and so that will have its world premiere in March. So we go into
Wow.
rehearsals the end of February, early March, and then it opens at the end of March, and we'll have a 5-week run. And it's
Where is it gonna premiere?
at Zach. It'll be at Zach Theater. Yeah, and so we have an Instagram you guys can all follow and that kind of thing. But yeah, we just had a marketing launch meeting 2 days ago to kind of talk about the marketing of it all. People are it's what I set out to do was create a Mexican Disney princess. That's what I wanted. I was like, we need one. Why don't we have one? And so it's very Mexican Disney princess esque, but at the same time, it's like strong feminism story about a woman who it's not a woman, but a 16-year-old girl who's really trying to just like be like, "Hey, I can do it. I can save the world, and I'm going to." And she does. Again, a story about what if we succeed? What if we experience the joy in that all, and what does that look like if we win? So
That sounds like not only such a beautiful story and musical, but so much fun. Like, it's so much fun to be part of. I can only imagine just seeing it all come together and all the elements, like, that are part of it.
we have I've again with all of my work, I'm so lucky, so blessed to be able to go to these different places around the country to develop my work. People just are really supportive of my musicals. And so recently we also went to Live and in Color. Shout out Live and in Color, they brought us out. I was selected from a bunch of writers, the only one. And we went out in the middle of the woods in Connecticut and workshopped it for like a week, 2 weeks, I think, and had a couple of audience come in, and they loved it. But there was amazing, amazing humans that were associated with the project. I believe people who have been interviewed for this podcast, and it's just amazing. It's just amazing to kind of just see that, and also like to investigate. Culture and identity, right? Because identity is really hard, especially if you are Mexican, right? Mexican American and Chicano, and what that means, from your indigenous roots to your colonized roots, and what does that even mean? And so it's really fascinating. I think I'm still just kind of scratching the surface on what that is. Hence why now I want to really dive deep in with an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet musical, to kind of think about like what does classism mean and all that kind of stuff. But it's really fun, high energy. It's like 60 minutes of like, let's go, we're going on an adventure. And there's a lot of mariachi music, right? There's a lot of mariachi. There's other kinds of, I really packed in a lot of traditional folklorico music, talk about like where it really comes from in terms of the indigenous roots of it all. And then it's a musical, right? So it's all sung, a lot of story forward songs and that kind of thing. I want songs, all that good stuff. So it's really exciting. It's really fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be following along 'cause it sounds incredible. And, it goes to show you've been part of so many different types of stories and musicals and different types of music, which brings me to the fact that you're writing for the Portland Opera. And so how is that different for you personally from the other stuff you work on? And how is it similar maybe? But I can only imagine, like, it's a whole different kind of vibe.
Yes. So my first experience with opera was a commission from Boston Lyric Opera and Long Beach Opera back in 2020. We created they commissioned, I think it was 8 writers and 8 composers. And so I was a librettist. I was a co-librettist on this opera where we infused um, musical theater with opera, traditional opera, fused with TV and film and episodic kind of like features. And so, and jazz. We also had like a jazz number with like a lounge singer. And so I really, really loved it. I got to work with Pulitzer Prize winning folks and, people who just were like at the top of the game. It's crazy. It's crazy. And so I really fell in love with it. I mean, obviously, my background, my training is classical first. A lot of it is, playing the Haydn trumpet sonatas and all the different kinds of things. So I really have a connection with that, or a lot of orchestral works. And so I was like, okay, I like this. So I wrote the book. Now this I get to write the music, which is different, and so I get to compose the music for an opera. And it's actually a really unique award from the Mellon Foundation, where they're commissioning 5 teams over the next like decade to create stories about folks who are figures that have contributed to the society of Oregon. And so this upcoming opera that I am co-writing, I'm writing the music, and my librettist is Maya Milan Gonzalez, Chicana from Portland. She's amazing. We are writing a story about a living person, which is really, really exciting. Um, Her name is Eva Castellanos, and she is a crown maker. So she makes flower crowns for young women who are doing their quinceañera, or getting married, baptisms, that kind of thing. And so that is what she does. But she's such a big public figure in the part of Oregon that she's in. She's won like the President's Medal. She's done a lot of really, really amazing stuff. People who you never knew exist, right? And she's also a curandera. So she's a spiritual doctor, healer, and people come from all over to see her. And so she's still alive. We did a reading of it a couple months ago in Portland, and she was in the audience. She brought her family. She was amazing. And so that world premiere will happen at the end of the year. So I have to get to writing. Opera is very quick, unlike musical theater where it takes years and years and years. Opera commissions, I was like, great, we'll premiere this next year. So a lot of the writing for me, um, I'm focusing on that right now. Is a lot of guitar heavy stuff, a lot of corridos. It's a corrido opera. If you're unfamiliar, you should check out what a corrido opera is. There's a great one by Luis Valdez on PBS back in like the early 90s. Linda Ronstadt singing. It's amazing. Amazing. And right. Based on that. 7 big scenes that explore her life and a theme and a topic. And so I have, an orchestra, or sorry, a small ensemble that I'm writing for, like a chamber orchestra, lots of ranchera, lot of different kinds of music. But I'm really focusing on the indigenous side of her, and how it connects with some of those unique instruments in the percussion. So I'm really excited about it. Stretching me in a way that I am really excited about, because, a lot of musical theater, especially the way I like to write with musical theater, is a lot of pop tunes and, like pop form. But with opera, everything is sung through from beginning to end. There's maybe 2 lines of dialogue in the whole thing, and so, it's really stretching my imagination, and, I'm really excited about it. I think of, like, Quincy Jones, who wrote an opera, and other folks, and I'm just like, "That is amazing." Like, I wanna do that. So here I am. People are paying me to write them an opera, so I'm gonna write them an opera. It premieres at Portland Opera. They're, like, one of the biggest opera companies and, award-winning opera companies in the country, and they're amazing. So they've been really lovely to work with, um, and they treat opera folks really well. I'll just say that. They're really, amazing.
Incredible. And, like we said earlier, ever growing, ever expanding, and challenging yourself. And it just, with everything you're doing, it just leads me to ask my last question, which is what's next? What can you talk about or share that you're working on?
Yes, so I just want to shout out that I am directing in a production of In the Heights down at Musical Theater West. I will be in the director chair. I've directed a couple of other things, and so I will helm that production with the amazing cast. That will announce the cast list soon. Many of you will know a lot of the people that are in the cast, just like such legends in the industry. I My co-director and choreographer is my dear friend Marisa Herrera, who's a Chicana out of Azusa, where my grandpa's from. Funny story, and she's a brilliant choreographer. And so I have, and of course my director Rod, who's just incredible, a LA local. But I'm really excited about it. It's happening in Long Beach. And I've done the show. This will be my 24th production since it first was released. So I have at some point I feel like I was the only Latino music director, which I know there was plenty out there, but I got called for every In the Heights when it first became available. And then, I think I can say this. I'm also an artist, going to be announced as an artist in residence at Cal Poly SLO, and we're going to do a dance workshop of Sueños, and we're going to bring in our choreographer and do a week long dance workshop in preparation for another thing that I cannot say. Um, and so that will also be partnered with PCPA, which is another great theater down in Southern California. And finally, I think that's all. I think that's all.
That's a lot, though. And everyone out there, follow Jesse. I'm gonna put their links down below. Um, but yeah, you've got a lot going on. So Jesse, thank you so much for being on. I know
Or
you have your hands in many things. You're constantly thinking about the next thing and planning and writing and moving parts and all that stuff. So it has been an honor to talk to you and get to hear about your journey. It's definitely inspiring. You're a magic maker, and it seems like you really love the magic that you're creating.
well, thank you for having me, and thank you for doing the work you do to uplift all of us, and give us a platform to just kind of talk and share what we've been doing. So I appreciate it, and also like to the gente out there, let's support each other because we need it more now than ever, especially right now.
We definitely do. And we need those stories. We need those voices. So everyone out there, go out there and do some magic, and we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.